Good morning and welcome to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. Legacy Planning is committed to helping you provide personalized and compassionate estate planning to help you organize and transfer your estate smoothly with minimal taxes, costs, and hassles. Steve has the mind of an attorney and the heart of a pastor, and he'd love to take your call this morning to answer your estate planning questions. The lines are open at 1-800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Now, here's your host of Legacy Planning, Steve Waltar.
Good morning, Seattle and Great Northwest. Boy, I am live and I am local. I know this show's kind of had a pre-recorded thing for a while, but I am so live and local. I drove over from Kirkland this morning. It is foggy as I look outside. I'm really excited to be starting this show. I've been doing estate planning for over 20 years now, and this show, Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar, it's really about sharing my experiences, my war stories over the last 20 years of doing this sort of thing. They call it a practice because we never get perfect, but it's an enjoyable practice. And prior to doing estate planning law, I did kind of divorce law, I did family law. In fact, before that, I actually was at Princeton Theological Seminar. I thought I wanted to be a pastor or teacher. So that was kind of cool. Worked in a couple of churches. In fact, I met my now wife through an experience there in Wedgwood, right in the Seattle area. But I didn't feel a deep sense of call. I worked in some churches, wanted to be of counsel, be of help. And then when I finished out my time at seminary, then I came and lived in the Seattle area again. And I'll probably talk more later about my journey into the estate planning practice. But, I've been doing estate planning a long time now, and I realized that there's kind of a balance between doing estate law and you have to know about wills and trusts and things like that, but it's also very pastoral, and I had a training in both. So now I say I've got the mind of an attorney and the heart of a pastor. That's, at its essence, that is estate planning. And this is a call-in show. We would love to hear you, call in. So you can call us at 1-800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. And I don't want to monologue. I don't want to talk too long. What I want to do is tell stories. What I found is Jesus really got through to people by asking questions and telling stories. And that would be pretty hard for me to do just being here alone, monologuing you. You're driving, you've had your coffee, I've had my coffee this morning. So I've got in the studio with me today a guest, a friend, a colleague. He's a financial advisor, and his name is Geer. Ron, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Steve, thank you for the opportunity of being on the show. I've had the benefit of talking with, thousands of conversations about money, and it's taken 20 years. Over a 20-year period, and now in 1 hour, I get to talk to 1,000 people and do it all over again. So thank you for letting me be here today.
So one of the things that I've learned is being an estate planning attorney, I can do a great will or trust for someone, but if the way that people manage their designated beneficiaries on their IRA or their insurance or things like that, then my entire estate plan falls apart. It doesn't work just right. So that's why I want you here today. I know you've got a great heart for people. I want to learn a little about you and your background. But as a whole, I'm going to invite a bunch of good financial partners, because legacy estate planning is not just about technical wills and trusts. It's making sure we're protecting assets for the right people, and we're protecting the whole estate.
Correct. Yeah. And I appreciate you talking about that, because whenever I'm working with somebody, I have to have, as I'm helping somebody build wealth, I want to make sure it's done correctly. And bringing professionals like you, in with me gives a client a good, effective team. So.
I find that people really don't plan to fail. They just fail to plan. Mm-hmm. People may get insurance, they may have a few assets, and it's pretty rare that they finally realize, oh my gosh, I should have a will. And so they come into me, and I have to spend some time asking them, why now? What's happened? So we can build a plan, but people often don't know the cost of failing to plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see. So I have a background in aviation, and before you fly an airplane, you build a plan for it, and that way, when the emotions kick in, when the stress kicks in, you have purpose. And I think, especially today, looking at what happened in the market, people who don't have a plan are going to emotionally react the wrong way. And so a plan is the opposite of emotion. It gives you purpose and a moment of clarity, and then when the emotions kick in, and they will, you're going to be successful. So.
Yeah, life happens, and incapacity can happen. So, let's give out the number again here. It's 800-955-8200. If you are worried about, why should I plan? I mean, what happens if I die without an estate plan? And by the way, when I give seminars, I make people raise their hand. How many people in the room are never going to die? Well, we're all going to die. And so there's going to be some impact of our death on our loved ones. So if you're worried about, my gosh, how do I know if I have a good estate plan? Do I even need to have a plan in place? By all means, give us a call at 800-955-8200.
So, Steve, one of the things you and I were talking about is not, you and I tend to get into the technical pretty easily, but I think it's good for people to see, learn more about you and how you became an estate planning attorney. So I know when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I had all these high aspirations, and now I'm a financial advisor. Probably more satisfied doing this than maybe I would have had I gone down the other road.
I bet your clients like to hear about your fighter pilot time even more than the other.
They're dreams. I didn't actually sit in the cockpit, but I can tell stories as if I did. But when you were 5 years old, did you have aspirations to be an estate planning attorney, or maybe talk about your journey a little bit on becoming an attorney?
Oh my gosh, this is a football weekend. I wanted to be a professional athlete, of course. I was the oldest of four. I grew up in the Tri-Cities, and this was before the Seahawks were even a team. And ironically, the Vikings were a team I liked growing up. So when they came to town, we drove across state and we watched those games. So yeah, I think as a young kid, I wanted to dive and catch the ball, and I played some of that. My dad was a nuclear engineer, growing up in the Tri-Cities. I never kind of got into the sciences. So when I went to school at Seattle Pacific University here, I wanted to be a pastor or teacher. I think I was motivated by my own youth pastor. I majored in English and religion, and I was still kind of sorting out my faith. And then I went back to Princeton Seminary because I thought, gosh, I want to know more about this. And so I wanted to be of counsel. I wanted to be of help. And that's what drove me to Princeton Seminary. Part of your training there is to do 2 years of internships. And so I came actually to Wedgwood here in Seattle, worked at a church. My very first sermon, it was November 24th, and it snowed, and 8 people showed up at the first service. I'm like, God was protecting me from too big of a crowd. And at the second service, there was more people. But it, I still sometimes look back and think if I'd have had a different experience in ministry, either here in Seattle, kind of like the church I grew up in, it just beefs up in the summer. Sometimes the summer's where everyone here leaves, and I think. It was a fine experience, but it wasn't wonderful. And back in Trenton, right there by Princeton, it wasn't a great experience. And I joke about it. This guy that's my senior pastor in Bellevue, he grew up in the same city in Richland, and he kind of left the faith and did this and that. And he came back, and now he's on fire. He's doing great. But my experiences in the church weren't exactly perfect, and I was still figuring out my faith. So, I finished. I got an MDiv from Princeton, but when I was done with all that, I still wanted to be of counsel and of help. And my wife's mom thought I was so great at arguing that I really ought to go to law school.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And as a parent now, I know, some kids are good at arguing, some are not. So I went to law school, and I did lots of things. I mean, I don't know if I'm boring you with my story here, but what happened is, in law school, I prosecuted for a couple of years. It's called a Rule 9 internship. Mm-hmm. So I represented the city of Federal Way, and I got to try cases and do things even as a law student. Right now here, sitting in Soto, I worked for a PI firm, and I wrote settlement packets, but that just didn't get me excited, trying to, help people figure things out. Then I did family law. Oh my gosh. Once I graduated from law school, that's where the work was. Family law, divorces. So for 2 years, I was just, handling tough cases.
Yeah. Do you feel like with, doing divorce law versus estate planning that there's more of a ministry that you can extend, as a pastor, we think of ministry that comes from the pulpit. But in our line of work, where people's money goes is where their heart is, and it seems like with estate planning you can really have an impact in people's lives at that point.
Yeah. Money and treasure and things like that. I think I'll put it this way. I think that helping people out of a bad marriage, people make mistakes. People get divorced. I think that there can be a ministry helping people get out of bad situations. Yeah. Sometimes people cried when they were at the courthouse and it was finalized, and sometimes they celebrated. They got out of a bad relationship. They had a new start. It was a little odd, though, when people said, Steve, we want a Christian attorney to help us do a Christian divorce. And thought, there's some cognitive dissonance. That sounded odd.
Yeah.
But at some point, just all the litigation, courts don't really have a solution for people's lives. Mm-hmm. And it got to be a drain. I finally went unlisted with my phone number because if my own clients were worse than opposing counsel, there's something wrong with that litigious mentality. And so the way I got involved back with estate planning was I was working at a firm doing all of this sort of family law and a little general litigation, and my mother-in-law died. So I'm now married at this point. And so Glenna Rice, she passed away, and I knew the family, so I did the probate. And I worked with their accountant and did the 706 estate tax return. It's 26 schedules long, and it used to be, in some ways, more complicated. So I realized that I was able to help this family. Now, the funny thing about their family is, well, funny, but her dad was a dentist for 41 years in Wedgwood. Paul Allen was his patient. They had a toy store. You've heard of him.
Yeah.
Heard of him, yeah. They had a condo in Sun Valley. They had a condo in also at Crystal Mountain. They had the first nursery school that right there in the Wedgwood area. I mean, they had some sophistication. Glenna was a buyer for Nordstrom. They had all the stuff, right? They had sophistication. They had a will. It had a bypass trust, but they were clueless. Yeah. When Glenna died, it's like, well, what do we do? How do we handle this legally? And I was able to help them through the legal process. And, of course, I knew the family. And I started realizing, gosh, I've got the mind of an attorney, the heart of the pastor. That is estate planning. So I left the firm that I was at, went to an exclusive estate planning firm. That's all I've done now for over 20 years since then.
Okay. What when I think of estate planning, I think of drafting documents. I think of, how do we avoid estate taxes, probate. What kind of demographic should have an estate plan? And maybe what is an estate plan?
Yeah. Well, we'll give the technical, and then I'll give maybe a teaser, and we'll take a little break here. But, okay. I mean, an estate plan is giving what you have to who you want, the way you want, when you want, how you want, right?
So it's like a voice from the grave.
Usually with the least amount of taxes, costs, and though I love you, Steve, attorney fees, So it's a plan that works while you're alive and when you die. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Sometimes people come to see me for a will. A will's a great thing, but it's incomplete. It only helps when you die, and we'll talk about how it helps. It helps with the court process. It doesn't help you when you're alive. I think a good estate plan ought to keep you out of court while you're alive. A good estate plan should make sure the right people are admitting you to the hospital or managing your money or your checkbook. And it's a real gut check. When people are thinking, who do I list as a guardian for my children, I often change the question. I say, if you're in a car accident, who do you trust to pay your bills? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It seems like
if it would work for them, there's a good chance it might work for their children.
Yeah. So it's really about relationship. It's insurance on relationship.
So the other part of your question was like, who needs a plan?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is my philosophy: is everybody needs a plan. Not everyone needs a revocable living trust. In fact, not everyone even needs a will. It really depends on the person. What do they own? What are their goals and things like that? But I think we all need estate plans. And my father was a nuclear engineer, and he treated everyone the same, whether they had a PhD in nuclear engineering or whether they were sweeping up the church or, I just love that value, and I think I've carried that forward. There are firms that all they do is they deal with people who have $5 million or more. They only do trusts.
And ironically, if I go to Richland and I drop your dad's name, everybody will know him because of the way he treated people and who he was.
And your wife went to the same church I grew up in.
That's
West
funny.
Side.
We found out about that afterwards.
Yeah. So my philosophy is we all need estate planning, but until I get down and talk to people personally, individually, I can help somewhat over the phone here. By all means, call in at 1-800-955-8200. We'll talk about your needs, and we'll talk about your estate plan. You're saying what demographic needs it? Different people need different things. Some people need the estate tax planning portion. Some people want to avoid a court process. Some people want to make sure that, you don't have to go to court just to manage things if they're unable.
So you don't have to be worth $10 million to have to finally build an estate plan.
No. Everyone needs. And when my kids turned 18, they got powers of attorney. Why? Maybe I'll tell you after the break. So we're going to take a little break here. Feel free to call us at 1-800-955-8200.
Legacy Planning. Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Has it been over 5 years since you've reviewed your estate plan? Well, the laws keep changing. You'll definitely want to keep listening. The lines are open at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. Live and local. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Wondering if you really have complete, up-to-date estate plans? Call Steve right now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
We're back. We're local and we're live. This is Steve Waltar with Legacy Planning. What is legacy planning? It's making sure that your will, your trust, your powers of attorney is up to date and that your financial plan does not implode that. I mean, this is New Year, so this is really a good time for people to plan. I don't know if you find that, Ron, but, what do people do when they call you and it's New Year? Do you find some people are setting resolutions?
Oh, pretty much everybody is. I think this is the year that I didn't because I didn't want to break it. And so I will be successful this year. No. Everybody, it seems like we're all looking for the easy button. This is a time when gym memberships are being advertised like nothing else. We have the quick pill to lose weight. Everybody's looking for something.
The lottery's really big. People just want to buy a ticket and have their problems go away.
And we deal with that with our clients. So you had mentioned a will earlier. The easy button is to go find a template online, draft it. How do you really talk people through that? Should they just buy a will, draft it, or should they bring you into their life as a professional?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that a lot. Steve, how are you better than the internet? Or why shouldn't I just do this form? And, before I can even get to completely answering that, I have to build a little rapport and find out a little bit more about the person. Yeah. But the reality is an online form might fit the circumstance or it might not. It might not even be the best tool. I mean, essentially, my documents are free. I mean, really. It's my expertise at discerning, at figuring things out. That's the real knowledge. Someone could buy a $30 will kit and it would cause a probate process when one dies. And it may be that they want to do a plan that completely avoids that.
Is probate bad? I mean, I hear the word and we all think it's a negative thing. Is that something everybody should avoid or how does that work?
Well, it's funny. Probate, whenever I'm with people and I say, how many people want to avoid probate? And they all raise their hand. And they say, how many people know what probate is? And very few know what it is. Probate is just the legal process proving when someone dies and then going through with or without a will. It's the court process to retitle things, pay off creditors, notify the heirs, and things like that. Washington State has a pretty good system. Mm-hmm. Generally, a probate will be finished between 6 months and a year, and it may be $6,000 to $12,000, like $1,000 a month. I mean, we have no set fees. Some states, like California, it's 4%. I mean, it's set by statute. Every attorney in the freaking state does the same fee. When I wrote my first book, I've written 2 books on estate planning, I researched Washington law, and it used to be that Washington was 5% until an attorney sued the state bar and said, how can you limit me? What if it's complicated? Yeah. And so now we have all these rules, but it's based on the time, the effort, the expertise, kind of the higher rise building you're in, the higher the fees are.
And I think I have one of your limited edition books, the one that was printed upside down inside the blank.
You got one of those. That's true.
Yeah, it's good. It's
So I can't say whether probate's good or bad. The goal is when I'm talking to someone, it's like I'm trying to figure out, well, what are you trying to accomplish? For the married folks, do you want there to be – let me tell you a story. So I got a case from a Microsoft client. He didn't plan beforehand at all, but he had his retirement funds. He had his house. Mm-hmm. He had insurance, and he thought, I'm going to be so smart that I'm going to say that – 25% of my insurance is for my son and 75% is for my wife or whatever it was. Well, when he died, guess what? Because he had no plan. And by the way, I don't know, I'm tired of giving out the number here. So for right now, this is what happened with him. When he died, his wife couldn't refinance the home because they held the title in both names, husband and wife. And so we had to do a probate in order to get her appointed just to handle the house.
Yeah.
Didn't need it for the bank account, right? That's a joint account or whatever. But I told you that he put his insurance payable to his son. Well, the son was 12. The son can't own an account at 12, and Prudential was the insurance company. They said, we'll pay you 1% until you're 18, and then you get a check. So instead, what we did is we had to do now a guardianship. So we had to go to court, one, to get husband's name off the house to the wife, and then two, even though the wife is the mom of the surviving child, we also had to go to court just to appoint her as the legal guardian to represent the interest that the husband gave to the son.
You are in the relationship business.
Oh, what a mess. I mean, and so if they'd have done their own will, that still would not have been able to handle that.
Yeah.
With the proper estate plan, we could have wiped out court, we could have avoided the guardianship, we could have avoided the probate, and just made it really easy for the surviving spouse.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people will have the technical information for a lot of pieces, but not really understand how the pieces fit together. You know, I mean, I'm seeing in this day and age, we look at the market. In fact, I pulled off this morning the study over the last 30 years of what investors have actually made in the market. And so over the last 30 years, investors that invest in equities or stocks made 3.79%. And the stock market, or the S&P 500, made 11%. You know,
Holy crap.
Where is that separation?
Yeah,
Now
why the big difference there?
Yeah, because it was behavior. They did not have the coaching. They didn't have a plan that helped them connect the dots. And we see, stepping into the new year, the market's down. And, you know, everybody, they may own the same stocks, but are they going to be disciplined? Are they going to allow the market to do what it does? Are they going to have that plan that's going to support them?
Let me jump in right there and give out the number again, because if you've got any question about your financial plan, what's a good financial plan, or anything about estate planning, wills, trusts, powers of attorney, we're here to answer your questions. So it's 1-800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. If you're worried about, do you have the right sort of portfolio? Is it going to work? What do you do when this market's up or down? And then what if you have this great will plan? Who should be the beneficiary of your retirement funds? We can deal with those things.
Yeah.
So you kind of talked about some discipline in planning. I mean, how much of financial planning is coaching and how much of it's technical?
That's good. So I studied math and science in college, and I got into finance thinking this is great. I have a technical outlet, and I can make money doing it. But the more, I've done this 20 years now, and the more I've done it, I've realized it's not about me. I have to be responsible, and I have to know what I know. But it's about being with people, and it's much more a relationship business because people make decisions on emotions, and it's encouraging people to, in that moment of clarity, decide what's going to be successful, what's going to be your purpose for money, why are we doing this, and then being that person that can go in and help them execute the plan and follow through with the plan. And I think New Year's resolutions is all about follow through. It's you and I were joking at breakfast this morning that if you could have the best exercise equipment in the world, or you could have a big rubber ball, a dumbbell, and one of the best trainers in the world, what would you choose? And talking through that, it's obviously the trainer because you're not going to feel like working out every morning, and you're going to have that accountability that's going to keep you on track to be successful. Equipment won't do that.
Human nature makes people be lazy.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I already bought that big expensive equipment. I just don't, I can look at it. I don't have to work it. But if a coach pushes you or says, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. And we end up, earlier this year, my wife and I had the idea of getting, Fitbits for the kids. And so we started tracking activity that we were all doing, and it turned into a family competition. And now the kids are, I have my oldest is 16, and it's hard to keep enough food in him, but we're after a healthy lifestyle, and we have that accountability that's built in. And I still want to be a macho husband to my wife, so she sees when I run and when I work out, and we kind of have that there. But that's a plan that works for us. It wasn't the equipment; it was the accountability behind it. And just like drafting documents. It's not the documents. It's you.
Ron, the market's been pretty far down, and tell us what people do with their money when the markets go berserk.
Yeah, I call it coachable moments because just reading this study, you asked why investors never really saw market returns. I think the average hold time was 3.5 years. So typically if we
why
look
is
at
that? Why is it so short?
Because if we look at historically what the market does, in general, every 2 years the market's up, every 1 year it's down. And people lose, it's very easy to be advisor when the market's good, everybody's excited, but when it's down, that's when they do the exact opposite of what they're supposed to do. They may sell out at the worst time. It's time for them to find another advisor because the advisor did something different. But people keep changing strategies out of fear, and I think a good advisor will just keep a client disciplined, keep them globally diversified, and teach them. Like we see what the market's done recently. It's going to do this over and over again over the next 20, 30 years. It's what we've seen, and make sure your portfolio is built to handle it. Investing should be boring.
So, we talked about that at breakfast, and you said, you want your excitement in your life and not your excitement over your portfolio.
Yeah, if you get up and you're looking at the screens and you're seeing lots of red and black, and that's your excitement for the day, you probably need to really rethink that. But your investments, you set up a plan, you let the investments do what they're going to do, you have a professional keep you disciplined, and you focus on your family and things that are important to you.
So we're going to take a break here pretty soon, but what I'd like to do is maybe talk about how do we make sure that, how do you work with estate planning attorneys? How do you make sure if you build a good financial plan with your clients that they get a will, that they get a trust, they have an appropriate plan? And from my standpoint, how do I do a good plan for someone? How do I make sure that the finances aren't so poorly invested that the plan won't work? Yeah. So after a break, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about coordinated estate planning. How does it work? I mean, how do you get everything to your spouse? How do you do your will? How do you choose an advisor? Feel free to call us at 1-800-955-8200.
Do you need a will or trust or no planning at all? You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
All right, we're back again. This is Steve Waltar with Legacy Planning, and foggy day in Seattle, but we're going to try to work through the fog and try to bring a little bit of clarity. We want to bring clarity to how the financial plans and estate plans work together. We talked about that before the break, and I know that some of you, this show's not been live before, right, for quite a while. So if you're too timid to call, we have an email. You can send us something to radio@waltar.com, and that's radio@waltar.com, and that's a great way now when we're on the show, or just to get something to my office and make sure that we have a chance to follow up with you. So we talked about that before the break, Ron. How do we make sure that, how do you work with an estate planning attorney? Or if you've done a plan, do you check if people have wills and trusts? I mean, how does that work from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a certain way to get, you get dressed every morning a certain way. And financially, there's an order at which you get dressed. You want to make sure somebody has their protection in place, and having an estate plan is part of the protection. I think is if I jump right to investments or some of the stuff that I just enjoy talking about, but I skip over what's important. It's savings habits. It's getting all the documents in order, the insurances, and then once I've done all that, I've earned the right to talk about the stuff that I've been trained in and that I like to do. So. Usually, in the times that you and I have worked together, I brought you in, after the first meeting or two to make sure that everything is set up, the foundation is built, so then we can build a house, which is the fun part for me. So But yeah, it's.
I'm going to jump in on that house thing because often this is just a good explanation. When people think that a will is going to control everything, I usually just analogize and I say, look, if you hire an architect, they do a blueprint. Does that build the house?
Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, it's the instruction manual. You have to hire the construction workers and lay the foundation, this, that, and the other. I mean, a will, it's a who gets what, when, and how, but it has no authority till someone dies. And then we go to court and we go through the probate process. And again, I've got, dozens of probate cases happening now. And for many other clients, we avoid the court process. But what people need to understand is the will is incomplete. It doesn't help you when you're alive. And on topic here, it usually doesn't control your beneficiary designations.
Yep. And let's just say that somebody did not get dressed in order. It looks kind of funny when they're wearing their socks on the outside of their shoes or whatnot. But like with estate plan, what happens when something goes wrong? Let's say the financial advisor jumps right to investments or insurances or wherever they focus, and they skip over the estate plan and they miss beneficiary designations. Or tell me a war story or something that will wake me up a little more. It is early. It's Saturday morning.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I was telling you about when people designate their minor children as beneficiaries on their insurance, it is a nightmare because then when someone dies, it requires a court process, it requires a guardianship, a lot of oversight, and it ultimately doesn't do what they want. Most people that have insurance and they want it to meet relational needs, right? Mm-hmm. They want to make sure their kids have a chance to go to college, to have a down payment on a home. They don't want the kids to get it all at 18 or at 21 and then blow it. They travel the world. I mean, there's no legacy there. Maybe we get back into what is a legacy.
Kind of like the prodigal son,
Yeah. And I probably don't hear as many stories as are out there. But I mean, statistically, I think people buy cars within like 3 days of an inheritance, but even millions of dollars are blown within 18 months.
Wow. So, do you feel like, in general, you have a lot of financial or investment advisors recommending estate planning documents, or in your experience working with other advisors, do you feel like they just pull you in as a professional so you can make recommendations without maybe an untrained bias?
Oh, I like that. That's a good question. So I was sitting in this advisor's office one time, and this advisor happened to be the sort of person that thought that the solution for every single investment was an annuity. And, I mean, annuities can fit in the world, in the realm of things, but they're certainly not the only tool. And so, he generally would try to micromanage things. He would generally say, look, I've met with these people and this is all they need, or I've met with these people and this is all they need. And I don't really like it when someone's telling me what they, a non-attorney, think their clients need for estate planning.
Especially when there could be a bias towards what's going to put money in the financial advisor's pocket.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So I had this I thought I'm a pretty good listener. I do wills and trusts, and I do, there's will-based plans, have to have powers of attorney and all sorts of things that work during life and at death. And then there's living trust-based plans, okay? They function different. They're apples and oranges. I try not to have very much of a bias. I try to have no bias about what fits, but I was in this office and I was talking with these nice people, and I was finishing my last little will drafting questions. We could talk about the estate planning process, but right at the end of that, the gal says, "Steve, how come Susie Orman says some people want a living trust?" And I said, "Well, some people are really kind of concerned about the probate process. They want to keep things private. They don't want anyone to be able to read their will." She says, "Well, we're worried about that." I said, "Well, some people want some creditor protection for their spouse. They love their spouse, but they really wouldn't want them to, get in a car accident. They lose the assets." Okay. Well, and some people are worried that the spouse may remarry and all of a sudden the snake lady takes it as opposed to, the kids. And so after about 6-7 questions in a row.
I met the snake lady, by the way.
I finally said, "Would you guys like a trust?" And they said, "Yes, we would love a trust." And, you have similar agents in a will or in a living trust. So it didn't take me long to kind of modify my notes to cover their entire trust plan. And that was kind of an aha moment for me where I realized, it isn't necessarily a factor is the size of the estate or their estate tax avoidance things. But I just got to be really good at asking people questions about what do they want. And at the end of this whole thing, they were thrilled. It was a retired pastor and his wife. I gave them a discount on my fee. I felt good about that as owning my own business. And then when they left, and the advisor, he wanted to know what happened. I told him, okay, well, I was going down this road, but then they switched. They wanted a trust. He was like, how come you gave them a trust? They don't need a trust. I'm like, they wanted a trust. And it's like need and want. And I mean, it's a bigger, stronger tool. It's not for everyone, but he was all mad at me about that. And I thought, my gosh, he's a one solution fits all. And I just, I'm the one that was actually a little too pigeon-headed there. And it dawned on me, I just need to ask enough questions to design a plan that makes them feel good. Yeah.
And something you said there is that he was mad that you recommended that. I think a lot of times in this industry, we make it about us when in reality, what you said is you just like to ask questions and listen. And, I think my side of the industry has a habit of creating questions or creating answers to questions that people didn't even have, like the complexity around investing and standard deviation and correlation and all these really cool 3-syllable terms. When in reality, that's not what's important. It's how can you step into somebody's life and find out what's important to them, what's their purpose, and how do you put that together?
It's not about us. That's the statement you said. Just struck me. I think, was it the guy that did the Saddleback books? He was wrong. I'm blanking on the name, but that's the very first line of the book. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Dang it, it's not about us. And I think that's at the heart of what an estate plan is. Look, we're all going to die at some point. And so is it worth a little bit of facing that reality and getting something in place so that your loved ones, your spouse, your children, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes they're special needs children. My gosh, if people don't have a plan, it's ugly.
Exactly.
I mean, have you seen it for any of your clients? What's happened if they failed to plan?
Well, all the time. I think, especially right now, and I work really hard in my company to coach my clients. And, we've seen the market do some crazy things, and I have yet to receive a phone call. We knew the market was going to do what it does because what happened in the last 2 weeks has happened, 20 times over the last 30 years. So, it's making it about them, not getting too technical. I think we need to offer enough to demonstrate that, we're a professional, we take our job seriously, but to really leave the technical stuff to only when it's necessary.
Ron, do you give free initial consults for people?
Yeah. I would say my new slogan is heart of a pastor, mind of a financial advisor. So
you're borrowing mine.
Came up with that on my own. Yeah, my wife and I we're now just registered investment advisors. We're fiduciaries, and I love. I tend to like to get out of the technical now. We joke that I'm a recovering analytic, but a lot of times, especially this year, as I do financial reviews with existing clients, we don't talk about money. We talk about what's important to them. And I've consulted a lot of people at my church. I guess God's provided for us, I have to focus on people. And so, when somebody comes in, they're getting to know me and I'm getting to know them, and the relationship has to work both ways. And so I don't typically charge on the first meeting. Okay.
Well, my office, 425-455-6788. Anyone that's a guest on my show, I have the contact. Ron, you could give out your number as well, but I want people to feel free to come in. I give free initial consultations at my firm. Yeah. What I find is that I just don't want to, I can't be extremely helpful with details over a really short phone call or even a plan call. It's much better for them to get a questionnaire, names and spellings, and they kind of organize their assets, and then they come in. I give them up to an hour. I mean, it's in that amount of time, I can kind of be the heart surgeon, and I can ask some questions. And, of course, they love their children and sometimes there's estrangement. But I want to be the person really not asking them, how do you spell things? I want to be looking at them eyeball to eyeball, and I say, look, why are you here?
Yeah.
And what have you done? What's in place? And sometimes people see me because they just got a cancer diagnosis, and they are now really, really having to do something.
Yeah.
So my phone number at the work is 425-455-6788. That's 425-455-6788. And again, radio at Waltar. That's WALTAR.com. That'll be a way to field some questions.
And Steve, what I've done this a long time, and I feel like I'm so blessed to have the clients that I have. And my wife and I were talking about this, how I'm not focused on bringing a lot more clients in. And so, typically when I have a consultation, it's a 10-minute phone call, and it's more about their values. I'm more concerned about the relationship working than anything else, because I think life is too short to have
life
a relationship
is too
doesn't
short.
work for both people.
And right before the break, sorry to cut in there. If I tell you that there are documents right now, HIPAA kicked in, and if you don't have a good estate planning document called a power of attorney, your entire estate plan may implode. So let's just leave that out as a thought. And call us if you want to talk at 800-955-8200.
Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Is there ever a good time to do estate planning? Ask your kids. They'll know that right now would be the perfect time. Call in for the right answers at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar, committed to helping you with personalized and compassionate estate planning. The lines reopen for your call at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
All right, we're back for our last segment. This is Steve Waltar with Legacy Planning. The reason I called it legacy planning and not just legacy estate planning is that, for it to really work, you got to have your finances lined up along with the estate planning documents. So, Ron, we want to talk a little bit about how does that work?
Yeah, so I read a story. It wasn't a story. It was actual publication that, because it went to the IRS and became public record, about an estate plan that went wrong. So there was an individual that was married, 19, had a 401k, divorced within about 6 months, married again, had a 40-year marriage, family, died, did not change the beneficiary on the 401k, and his $4 million 401k went to his first wife. That's a prime example of when the estate planner, and he had a complicated estate plan, but they were not talking to the financial advisor who was advising on the 401k. So how do you prevent
And that was a
thing?
$4 million mistake.
$4 million mistake.
Wow. And that's letting the federal government kind of trump the goals that the family had.
And I think his kids probably didn't even know about the first marriage. It was a whoops. And their $4 million estate went to her kids.
Yeah.
So that's a prime example of when the relationship is not solidified between the advisor and the estate planning attorney. How do you avoid things like that? I mean, you've worked with a lot of financial advisors through the years.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to throw out two thoughts, and we'll explore each of these. One is one of the reasons I think living trusts are often a really good tool is they force you to not only do the documents, but they ask the right questions. Who should be the beneficiary of the IRA or the 401k or the insurance? Since you're not looking to cause a court process, it's more likely that the trust is going to own things or be the beneficiary. So that's it's a personal strategy. But many attorneys, when they do wills, they don't give a flying anything. They just don't think about anything other than the technical stuff. I'm doing a will. Who gets what? And they don't look at the beneficiary.
They look at what's going to put money in their pocket.
A will typically controls only the home, the real property, and the personal effects. Doesn't control the life insurance and things like that. So one is kind of the thoroughness of the estate planning attorney. The second reason that I think trusts are often a really good tool is I get a chance to work with a financial advisor, because I'm not going to be telling people how to be invested, but you better believe I want to tell them who should be the beneficiary of their 401k or their IRA. And a good relationship, it's on my questionnaire. Do they have a financial advisor or not?
Yeah, and maybe on your questionnaire they say you should say, are they working with Ron or not? But I don't need to plug myself here too much. What kind of action items do clients take today? I mean, they've heard us have a conversation on the importance that we can see from our industry, but what are some things that people should be doing?
Yeah, so I think that some people, everyone should be thinking about. It's a hard question, but at a seminar, and I'm giving some seminars, there's kind of plugging that here. I actually have people close their eyes and I just have them imagine. Mm-hmm. Imagine that when you wake up tomorrow, you're not at your home. You're in a hospital. Mm. There's tubes. There's dripping. Who will make your decisions? Who is going to take care of making health choices? Who's going to manage your money? And then I switch it and I say, now I want you to actually imagine that you die. Mm. Where are your estate documents? Who's going to be in charge? What is the impact on your loved one? So I think people ought to really think about an event that's going to happen at some point, that they're going to die. Yeah. We're all going to die. We may or may not be incapacitated. So, think about who you'd trust to manage your money.
Do you ever get that person who says, Steve, my goal is to bounce the last check when I die. I want to spend everything.
Yeah, I hear that, and I can laugh with them, but most people don't want to be a burden on their loved ones.
Yeah.
And, if someone tells me exactly when they're going to die and what they're going to have, I can say, I'll design the perfect estate plan for you. But, of course, we don't know exactly that day and that time.
It's kind of like putting enough gas in your car to make only the next gas station, where you don't factor in traffic or, any other things that could cause your car to run out of gas.
Exactly.
But you're either going to have an estate problem or you're going to have a poverty problem.
Right.
One or the other.
Yeah, and I guess the other part of it's not just a good, thorough attorney that really designs a plan that fits, but I think the other part would be, how do you follow through? How do you make sure that not only are the documents signed, but that the beneficiary documents are changed, that the assets are in line with the estate plan? That's easier to do with the living trust-based plan because we are redeeding the homes. We're putting them in the trust. We are doing letters to the institutions about who should be, how the assets should be changed. The brokerage account ought to be in the trust. Mm-hmm. And the 401k or the IRA can be payable to the spouse and then to the trust or something like that.
And is there protection from creditors having those in the trust, or how does that work?
Yeah, if you don't give something outright to someone when you die, then you can have lots of creditor protection. And how thick the walls of protection are, it's based on what we're drafting. So you have been on Legacy Estate Planning with Steve Waltar. This is live interactive radio, and today I've had Ron Geer with me, who's a financial advisor, a quality guy, someone I've worked with. And at our firm, we want to make sure that the estate plan is always working in line with the financial advisors. And heck, if someone doesn't have a financial advisor, we can recommend people. So we want to have, each week we're going to have different speakers. Today I had a financial advisor. I'm sure I'm going to have Ron back a bunch of times. Want to have people that are life insurance specialists, even pastors. I've got a guy in a small group with me who's battled cancer. He's worried about how to protect his legacy. So we're going to have great people. We want you to have a great time. Thanks for listening to our show, and we'll be back. We'll be back at you next week with Legacy Estate Planning.
Thank you, Steve.
You've been listening to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. If you have questions about what you heard on today's show or estate planning in general, be sure to call Steve's office in Bellevue to schedule your free no-obligation consultation. Call Steve at 425-455-6788. That's 425-455-6788. And remember, you can always listen to today's or previous programs by going to waltar.com. That's WALTAR.com. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and be sure to join us again next Saturday morning from 8 till 9, right here on 820 AM KGNW.